Hey everyone, this is Max. I want to thank you for joining me in another tutorial video. This is going to be the 5th video in our Mixamo Maya series. We're going to start working with animations in this video. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go into Mixamo and go over the settings for exporting the animations, things to look out for with that. I'm going to bring in the idle animation we're going to work on. You can see playing right now on the screen. I'm going to bring that into Maya, go over some settings and preferences you're going to want to have set just to avoid different issues. Some basic aspects of how to edit the animations and how to loop them. And then from there we'll work on to using other animations as well in the future videos. Alright, so to get started, what we're going to do is pause this and open up a fresh character. So again, I'm just going to be opening up the Maya version of the control rig that we saved out. This is the Mixamo control rig folder in the assets of our project folder. If you're following along, that'll be where this is at, or wherever you saved your version of this. Alright, so we have our default character to work with, and this is really convenient for adding a lot of different animations and doing different things to have this to revert back to. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up Mixamo, and we'll look at the animation that appears. So this is the animation I have playing right now. Just an idle animation. I did rename it from just idle to standing idle, just because they do have different types of idles, and I don't know why technically these two are the same but labeled differently. So, but any idle animation for the most part will do. Alright, so one thing to check, I did it to increase the character arm space a little bit, just because it was naturally clipping, so I wanted to keep it close with pretty much minimal to no clipping. You want to be careful not to extend this out too much, or the arms will look really unnatural while resting if they're out too far. Right, so from here, all we have to really do is just download this. So hit the download button, and we'll go through this section here. So the FBX binary is a good format to use for Maya. 30 frames per second is what I'm going to use right now, but it depends on what you're trying to match. More film animation can be done in 24, or you could see 30 to 60 frames per second, depending on what you're trying to do in a game engine and how well you're trying to have things play. So you choose from any of these. We're just going to stick with 30 for this. Alright, and then keyframe reduction, what this can do is go through and clean up any unnecessary keyframes that are on here, but for right now I'm just going to keep it at none, so it's the exact way it looks here. Okay, and then what we'll do is just hit download. Alright, so just to show you, I already have a bunch of animations, at least a few, in the data folder of my project folder. So these will be where these are at if you're following along with the project, file projects that I'm providing. So we'll be working with the standing idle and some other ones in future videos. Okay. It looks like I was just in there a little bit too long. Alright, so we have everything we need from Mixamo now. So we're going to go over is a couple of things you're going to want to watch out for setting wise when working with your character. So one thing that you might run into, so we'll kind of go through the problems of these, kind of point them out. Alright, so open up our file, Windows, Settings, Preferences, to open this up. I realize I went that a little quick. And then what we're going to do, a couple of things to check. Time sliders one, they'll generally default to this when you import an animation to whatever frame rate you're working at, but it's good to always double check to make sure when you're referencing footage or whatever you're working on that you have the proper frame rate for the pipeline you're working in or whatever footage you're referencing and what you're working with. But we're going to be at 30 frames per second, so that's good. And then right now I just have the playback at playing at a real time of 30 FPS. Alright, so it's one thing to check. The other thing we're going to want to look at, this will be in case you ever import an animation and it's not snapping to the character. So you can see here, there's two file dialogues. There's OS native and Maya default. If you are on OS native, which can be nice if you're trying to access stuff from off a hard drive, it'll kind of change the way the window works for getting to different projects, especially if you're on a Mac. So let's say we have this set here, and we'll import our animation, and I'll show you the error that will come up. So then we just open up our Mixamo control rig script, went to the Animate tab, I'm going to import animation control rig, and this defaults to the data folder, that's why I have these in here. And we'll go standing idle, and we'll import this. this is what's going to happen is we're going to have the animation, but it's actually not going to be snapping to the character and playing. And the time slider will change to match the amount of time that the animation needs. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reopen my control rig. So that way I'm starting fresh. What I'm going to do is go back to our Windows Settings, Preferences, go back to Files, Projects, and then if you have this set to My Default, you'll then be able to import your animation properly. So now when we import the animation, we're going to see that the animation is going to snap to that character, and the character will snap into the position of the animation. As you can see, it's more accurate the character snaps the animation. Alright, so another thing you're going to want to look out for, especially if you're working with your character in Maya, is that we have this setting set up. So we go Windows, Settings, Preferences, and Preferences again. So open this up. So this is important if you're trying to work with any animation in the program. We're going to want to go to our Animation tab under Settings, not the Animation tab under Display. So Animation here. And you're going to want to make sure you're in DG. You might be in Parallel by default, but when you're in DG, it'll make it so that way, like the eye key controls, especially on the feet, will be working properly. Sometimes they'll end up like shifting in and out of place mid like playback, and that's messed me up in the past when doing renders. So you're going to want to make sure that you're in DG evaluation mode, and that should stop any issues where the rig won't be following like the base like animations that you actually set up. So again, make sure this is set to DG and hit save. So that should help to make sure everything's working properly. This idle animation is pretty, it's not super dynamic. If there's a lot more movement or running, we can notice like issues with that if it wasn't in DG. Right, so another thing we're going to want to point out is what happens here. So I'm going to see if I double the time slider length, the animation will stop once it actually gets past the point that the animation data was for, which is 250 frames. So we see movement and then nothing. So a couple things we could do with that. So first thing before we kind of work on looping this is I'm going to show how you can add to the animation if you want to add more to it and kind of build off of these as bases, which I think can be a really great idea. Remember, just because you have access to this, so does everyone else. So if you do want to customize these to make them more personal to a character or something, this could be a really great starting point to use. But remember, this could also make your characters look kind of generic if they're using the exact same animations as everyone else. But for certain animations like idols or other things that are super common and always happening, then it might not be as noticeable. But for certain fight sequences or attacks, like the fireball attack, sometimes those could be very like, oh, that looks like that's from Mixamo. So if you do want to kind of adjust those and customize them, it's a great option. So what's cool about this is the animation data is imported onto the character, but it's not keyed in, so you could actually work with this. So this isn't going to have the proper timing. Let's say I wanted to just raise this arm. We'll kind of move forward a second. Raise this up. Forward another couple seconds. Another second, not do anything, and then we'll bring this back down. So what happened is now I can add on to the animation that's already currently there. And you can kind of work to, add extra detail and personality at this point, which is really nice. All right, so what we'll do is I'm just going to delete these frames. Delete by type channels. We'll delete that. What I'll probably do is actually make sure that wasn't set to 0. So make sure when you do delete your channel that you do it properly and go to the beginning. So that way everything is at its default state. There we go. Alright, so let's say I like this animation. I've done any customization I want to work with, and I am ready for it to kind of do more with it. So what we can do here is we can bake the animations to the controls. So we'll go through and kind of run through the animations. It'll bake anything you added to the animation on top of the animation, like motion capture data that's being applied as the base. So we'll do is we'll hit bake animation. This will run through twice. Right, so I'll speed this part up because it'll take a second. Alright, so now when we click on a control here, we can see there's now a bunch of red ticks. These are going to be keyframes for every single frame of the animation. Alright, so what's nice about this is you can save these out. What I'd probably do, just to make this really clean for yourself, to not have to repeat steps, is I would save these out at 2 different points. So we'll save the pre-looping and then looping animation. So I'd probably do, again, depending on how you look at these, you could save them in your assets folder if you want, or you could save them in your scenes folder. Just depends on how you want to work with this and how much editing you're planning to do. I'm not going to be really working on editing these, so I'm just going to keep them in my scenes folder. So I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it idle animation. That way when I'm working with different animations, I can keep everything separate and easy to kind of understand. So I'm going to call this xpot idle animation. And I could just save this out now that everything is keyed up. That way I have a base to work off of. So as you can see, we can see where these keyframes stop. So what we're going to do is go to Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editors. And the Graph Editor lets you see a flow based off of the way the keyframes are looking. So you could see like the flow of the animation based off the control and whatever you're working on. So we don't want to just have this selected. What we're going to do, we'll check our layers here, and I'll show you 2 ways you can go about this. So right now, we can see that the joints and mesh are all referenced. That's what this R stands for here. So that means we can't actually select anything but the controls. If you're bringing this into a scene, what you can do is these here allow you to control what you're selecting. So you can actually turn off everything but this one. This is the controls. And that will also make it so when you select stuff, you'll only select controls in the scene as well. So what we're going to want to do is select the entire character. We can see we have everything here now. Again, hard to read, but if you're editing this, you would generally work out it one piece at a time. And then what we'll do is we'll select all of those animations. What we can do is go to curves, post infinity, and then we'll go to cycle. So what this will do is it'll make it now where the animation will actually loop. And once it hits 250, it's not going to stop. It'll just keep looping and it'll loop forever. So if you want to have a stationary character in the scene, just kind of idling, standing there, you could have this character just sitting kind of out, constantly playing. And then from here, I'd probably just save this one out in that same folder, but instead of calling it, I'd probably call idle animation looping. So I can distinguish between the two. You know, that way if I want to make anything different between those. Right, so that's going to cover kind of just working with this character, some ideas of how to kind of add to these and how to bake these animations out and loop them. So if this was helpful, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if there's any questions you have. We'll be going over the walking animation in the next tutorial. And if there's any other ideas for videos you have, leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to work out a time to get to those if it's in my capabilities and timeline. Well, I hope this was helpful, and then I will see you in the next video. Make sure you subscribe for future content and follow me on the social platforms linked below.